Hey, my friends, welcome back to Premier Study in Investing. Just great to have you. I'm going to be reading through my notes on the Q3 earnings call from Altimmune. It's almost an hour long. It's a 55-minute call, so I'm going to try to save you some time. Give you the highlights. If you're new to the company, you're going to hear kind of the basic stuff reiterated, why this company thinks that they have certain strategic advantages, and what they've seen in their preclinical trials, as well as some of their other updates. They have multiple drugs. It's not just a COVID play, but it is pretty interesting. They had 4 people on their call, CEO, CFO, Chief Scientific Officer, and Chief Medical Officer. The CEO, his name is Vipin Garg, and he starts, I thought it was very interesting, speaking about COVID. There's been other companies that are running COVID drugs, and, when they start their earnings call, you maybe don't hear about it until like 10 minutes in or something. So I think that tells us a lot about the focus and the priority of different companies when their leadership comes on and they decide how to structure their introduction. This company, they go right into COVID right away, starting with their AdCOVID vaccine. Basically, they just tell us what we kind of already know, that they saw T cell response, the CD4, the CD8 antigens, that they have a 29-fold mucosal IgA antibody response. They also have additionally a serum neutralizing antibody response. They have multiple partners, and they added a new one called Lona. Just this week, the press release came out. So that's how they kind of open it up. They say that they have completed enrollment in a phase 1B trial for NasoShield, which is their anthrax drug. They're looking for a readout by the end of 2020 on that phase 1B. So that's something to look forward to next quarter. Also, Q4, they are starting phase 1 on their NASH. NASH is like a liver disease, non-alcoholic. I think it's hepatitis, actually. But they have a drug, Alt-801, so they're starting phase 1. Also in Q4, they're beginning phase 2 on another hepatitis drug. Scott Roberts, he talks a little bit more about AdCOVID. He talks a little bit about some of the advantages. He says it's a single dose, so you don't have to come back in. It does focus on the respiratory system, and he says it's very simple. Simple route, the nasal spray versus. He talked a little bit about, I don't know. He lost me a little bit about what the big deal was with getting a shot in the arm. If you're a kid, okay, I get it, but even kids get shots, so I don't know. But I mean, I guess it's nicer, I suppose. That's all I really gathered from his he kind of talked about it, but I didn't really pull much from what he was really saying. They said they had a strong activation of all 3 arms of the immune system, and they talk about this often. They always highlight, hey, we have this mucosal response that other people don't have. Do a little bit of research, try to find out more about what that is. But he also said that there's a high serum antibody titers. He talked additionally about a local and a systemic response. So there's an immune response from the entire body. There's also a specific local respiratory response that they saw. Again, he highlights the 29X mucosal. And he said that if we were talking about flu instead of, COVID, he said if we're talking about flu, all you'd really need is a 2 to 4 times increase in that mucosal response in order to really be immune from the flu for that year, for the strain or whatever you're looking at. So it just kind of gives us a bearing as far as, how does this 29X thing, how should we think about it? Now, one thing I picked up about this earnings call that I did not catch previously that I thought was very interesting, they had been talking about the sterilizing immunity, but they explained it. And this is how they kind of explain it. They said, we have a sterilizing immunity. The other companies that are delivering an intramuscular delivery on their vaccine, they say they would not have a sterilizing immunity. And they says what that would mean is that a person who didn't have a sterilizing immunity would still kind of be like a transmitter. They would still, carry the virus, though they wouldn't themselves be, experiencing any like adverse symptoms or anything like that. But they could still give to others. And so that was the big difference. He also said that the big thing beyond just needing to protect others is that masks would still be necessary and all of that. So I thought, that's interesting. That is a difference. That is a big difference when you're talking about 2 different kinds of immunity. He talked a little bit about the AdCOVID timeline. He says phase 1 to start in 2020, that they should have a data readout in Q1 of 2021, and then they jump immediately into a phase 2. Now they talked about a couple other drugs they had going on. They had the Alt-801, good response for their GLPI. Not exactly sure what that is technically. They had a Hep T cell phase 2, and for that you're looking at a once a month injection, and that they're looking for early data readout in 2022. So that's quite a ways away, maybe like 15 months or so. So nothing as far as an investor, depending on your timeline, nothing of a big impact there that you're going to be able to know as far as like profitability or future profitability. Now, T-COVID, they're starting in phase one. They're starting dosing in phase one right now, and they are looking to prevent clinical worsening as their endpoint that they define as a 4% decrease in oxygen saturation. On the T-COVID side of things, they're looking for data from the phase one in Q1 of 2021, which is exciting. They have a goal of about 100 patients in the phase two trial, and they're looking for non-hospital settings. So I think there's a huge opportunity, business opportunity, healthcare opportunity to treat people before they get into those critical stages and need hospital care. I think that's great. I really think that's great. I think it represents most of people, and I think it's the biggest opportunity. And so remember, that's the T-COVID. Well, continuing with the T-COVID, they said it could be used as a pre or post prophylaxis. 100% funded by the Army is what I got. If it's successful, this phase one, they're going to go to phase 2/3 and then seek emergency use authorization from the FDA in the United States. Now, on this NasoShield, this is something that they're running to treat anthrax. They completed enrollment in their phase one trial of that. They're expecting data next quarter in Q4 of 2020. Phase two could partially be paid for by BARDA, is what they said. So that's kind of exciting. I don't know how they have these deals with this money coming in, but it's pretty great. Looking at their financials real quick, we'll talk about, I'll give you 2020 first, and then I'll give you 2019, the same quarter, third quarter of 2019, as a comparison. So in 2020, this quarter, we had revenue of 2.9 million. Last year, we had 600,000. They said the general difference was a government paid some money for T-COVID development. R&D was 17 million compared to 8.7 million. They said that they were going to have some milestone payments due on their 801, and that they were going to give 1.7 million shares in the fourth quarter to Spitfire investors. So I guess they're paying shares in order to, it sounds like, pay for the licensing that they have on 801, something along this line. So the idea is 1.7 million shares going out to these other people. We'll look at that as far as share dilution, something to keep our eye on, but 1.7 million shares. General and administrative costs were 4.2 million compared to 2.2 million. They said that there was some legal fees and some additional compensation that they paid out. Net loss was 17.8 million this quarter compared to last year, 10.9 million. A call came in talking about the news that the Pfizer vaccine had 90% effective rate, and they said, what's your response? What do you have to say to that? And really, they went back and they highlighted the mucosal immunity, the role of the nasal cavity as a depository for the virus, that the mucosal IgA is unique, it's important, and that they were really trying to highlight that the AdCovid, that they saw this respiratory T cell response and that it was found in the lungs. So, it's not like in other parts of the body. I mean, he made the comment basically like, we're happy to see that the T cells we're looking for are in the place that we'd hope to find them. So that kind of thing. He also said something really, really interesting about just the general thought process of the entire pharmacy industry on how are we going to tackle this problem. And he said in the beginning, there's a lot of talk about cold storage, mRNA, the different approaches, the different supply chain complications. If you have something that needs to be stored at negative 75 degrees Celsius or something like this, versus, their drug, which they say is stable at room temperature. Vaxart has an oral tablet, right? All these different things. Do you have to go into a hospital care place, to get it? Can you take it at home? All these things. And then he said, it kind of changed, and they kind of started talking about these things of, okay, what if we come up with an immunity for people, but they still can transmit the disease? What are we thinking about that? Are we going to need a couple different drugs or a couple different vaccines? That's going to be a problem. People are still going to have masks. We're still going to have super spreading to anybody who isn't vaccinated. So what about that? And the reason they're thinking that is because they know that there's a huge manufacturing problem, even if they start early. I mean, Scott Gottlieb talks about that they just they're going to have a problem making enough, even if they find something, because you're not talking about like 10 million doses or 100 million doses, right? You're talking about billions of doses, especially if people have to take these things multiple times in a year, right? So many doses. And then he went on and he said, Also, we're starting to think more and more about, we've been doing all these trials for adults, we've been thinking so much about the elderly, but what about the kids, you know? And he said, what about kids' safety? What about, I'm still not exactly sold that kids can't receive injections. I'm still lost on that. I'm waiting for someone to kind of explain that a little bit better than what I've heard so far, because, I mean, kids get polio shots, they get measles, mumps, rubella. I mean, so, you know, I'm not, I'm not sure what advantage this company may have when it comes to pediatric vaccines, besides kids don't like shots, which I think is kind of not not really the issue at hand. Finally, they close out, I'm on my last page, that the NASH drug, this is the liver disease, they had an expert, Stephen Harrison, who said that after looking at their preclinical data, he says it's the best preclinical data he's seen. They really had a lot of confidence when they spoke about this in their word choice about the NASH drug, that they saw superior results in animal testing. They're seeing, a decrease in liver fat, decrease in fibrosis, and better weight loss results. And so something that has to do with obesity, they definitely talked about how obesity has a lot of like ties with all kinds of stuff, like, I don't know, fibromyalgia, with heart disease, with just all kinds of problems, right? And so helping people lose weight through this drug, if you have some liver deficiency, they were just very confident the way that they talked during that section. There's a delay on the timeline. A caller called in and said, what's going on with the T-COVID? We're looking for this therapy. We know time is of the essence. Other companies are already ahead of us. Why the slowdown? And the answer was basically, and they really worked hard. You could see the guy trying so hard to not say the word delay, but it's a delay. He said, what, like postponed timeline, or even something more like foggy than that. But he said up front there was a lot of contracting considerations that they had with the Department of Defense, who was going to be involved in paying for some of these things. So they had some red tape. They had to add some sites. They had to shift some things around. And so now they're enrolling aggressively. The readouts expected in Q1 of 2021. And so, they try to end that on a high point. But definitely it was delayed. And then the last question was, what does this Lana partnership bring to the table? And the answer was they have a large capacity, and that Altimmune's overall strategy is to get a lot of partners around the world. They know that this is a global problem. They want to have key pieces in many different countries. They want to be ready. They basically said that they know that capacity is going to be a problem for vaccines. They congratulated Pfizer. They know that it's probably going to take a couple different vaccines. They're talking about Altimmune, or some of these second wave drugs that they're talking about, or vaccines, second wave vaccines, as being complementary or supplementary to any shortfalls that some of the other vaccines may have. And we talked about some of that stuff, right? The sterilizing immunity, some of the longevity, and some of the supply chain storage type issues. So that's how the call ended. It's a pretty good call. I definitely learned some things. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you next time.